Hi, I'm Kelly. Thanks for joining me today where we will be making these Zuben earrings. Be sure to visit my Ravelry page, which I will put in the description box so that you can get the written description of the pattern. And then also I'm going to put some timestamps in the description box because I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I got the name of the earrings, and then we're going to go through just the techniques needed to be able to make the earrings, and then we'll also actually go through making the earrings. So let's get started. First off, about the name, I name all my patterns after stars, and since I made the earrings with green thread, I thought, oh great, I'll find a green star. Well, it turns out there's only one green star in the entire sky, and its name is Zubeneschamali. And since that is a bit of a mouthful, at least for an English speaker, I decided to shorten it to Zuben. But it turns out Zubeneschamali is actually kind of interesting star. First off, because it's the only green star, but then it also turns out it's only green to the naked eye because of some type of light theory that I don't quite understand. It's not actually green, it just looks green to the naked eye. But then there was also a bit more that I found as I looked at the star, which it is in the constellation Libra, the scales, but the word Zubeneschamali and the word for this, the name for the star next to it, Zubeneschamali, mean the northern claw and the southern claw, and that's because both those stars used to be in the constellation Scorpio, which is next door. I couldn't really find why they moved them, but I was just so surprised to stumble on a star that had such an interesting backstory that despite it being hard to say, I thought it would be fun to go ahead and keep the name from my pattern, and hopefully you kind of enjoyed that impromptu astronomy lesson. So let's move on to the techniques that you'll need to know how to do in order to complete the earrings. Okay, so let's get started learning the techniques we're going to use on these earrings. First off, I made the stitch pattern a little bit bigger when I was practicing, just so you could see the stitch pattern a bit better. And the modification for the smaller earrings is essentially just taking out this shell on either side and having a fewer stitches here. So let's get started on learning the techniques that we'll need. We're going to be working with beads, so the first step you'll want to do is to put your beads onto your yarn. I've just got a big bead here that I'm going to slide on. And next we need to learn how to work into the earring, so I've just grabbed a ponytail holder here. So the first thing we want to do is make a slip stitch to get the yarn onto our hook. And then we want to put the yarn into the ponytail holder. Oops. Get that tail out of the way. And then do a slip stitch so that the yarn is now attached to the ponytail holder. And then we're essentially going to act like this is a big stitch that we're working into from a previous row. So insert your hook into the ponytail holder, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then pull through. And don't worry if this looks a bit awkward. I actually find the ponytail holder harder than the earring to work on because it's stretchy. So yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and finish your stitch. So that's how you attach the yarn to your ponytail holder. Next, let's learn how to make the picots. So let's go on the end of a double crochet. So we'll make a double crochet into our ponytail holder here. And the instructions say to chain 2 and then add a bead, which we'll do in a moment, and then chain another 2. And then we're going to slip stitch back into that double crochet we just made. The place where I prefer to slip stitch for a picot is here, which would be the front loop only portion of the stitch, and then this loop here right next to it. So insert your hook into those two and make a slip stitch. And that's how you make your point at the end of each shell. And then I'll show you how to add the bead. Let me do another double crochet in the middle just to give us some space between so it's easier to see. So on the picot where we're adding a double crochet, get that out of the way, we'll chain 2, pull your bead up, kind of hold that as tight as you can against the other chains, and chain 2, and then slip stitch into that same place, except make sure your working yarn is in front of the bead. And slip stitch. And that's how you get your picot with the bead on the end. So we're all done with the technique, so let's get started on the earrings. All right, so let's get started making our earrings. First off, I just went, and got a little set of multiple sizes of hoop earrings. For today, we're going to use the biggest one. For the modification, I would use these smaller earrings. I've got little tube seed beads and a little container to hold them in so they don't roll everywhere. Got my scissors and my yarn needle for finishing, my 1.75 millimeter hook. This is number 20 thread. And I also have a bead needle threader thing. It's probably got a real name. I don't know what it is. So let me show you how to use it. You just open it up like this, put your thread through, pull it down in the end there, and then you can slide your beads onto your thread. And for the large size pattern, we need 7 beads per earring, so let me slide those on now real quick. All right, so I've got all my beads on, and I actually strung one extra just in case of the unforeseen. I don't like to live dangerously. So we'll set all this aside for now. Attach the yarn or the thread to your hook. Put it inside your earring. One thing I'd like to point out is I do my tensioning different with thread than I do with a bulkier yarn. With yarns, if it's really thick, I may only pull it over one finger. For most medium weight yarns, I put it over my pinky finger and my index finger. And for thread, I actually will even then go around my ring finger. It just gives me a bit more tautness, which I find is really useful for thread. So I'm going to pull my tail out of the way and slip stitch my yarn, my thread, onto my earring. And then we're going to work for the full size earring, 53 single crochets around the earring. Now you don't want to make these incredibly tight because you will have to come back and work into them. So they probably slide around a little bit as you do it. Just make sure that they don't slide all the way off the end of the earring as you're going along. And it's pretty likely that as you go, the stitches will get twisted, and don't worry about that because it's real simple to straighten them out at the end of the round. So I'm going to go ahead and do my 53 single crochet. I'm going to double count to make sure that I got it correct, and I'm going to make sure that all my stitches are facing outward and none are twisted, and I'll be right back with you. All right, so I've got my 53 single crochet, and I've turned everything to the outside. And I did just want to point out that this is your project. You make it look the way you want. If you want a little more or a little less of the earring itself to show, then you can add however many stitches along the edges as you want. And I also have here, this is the ones I made, my first draft, so to speak. And the hook on this one makes it hang from your ear a little bit more straight up and down, while the hook from this one kind of makes the middle be jutted forward a bit. Feel free to add more or less stitches on either side to get the point of the earring to hang exactly where you want it. Remember, this is your project. You don't have to follow my directions exactly. Be inspired, do what works for you. And I also wanted to point out, I made the world's fastest trip to the mall yesterday because of COVID to grab these earrings. I ran in, grabbed the first hoops I saw, and ran back out without trying to get within 6 feet of anybody. And I actually got ones that are a bit squared. And I was a bit concerned that that would be hard to work around, but it was actually just completely as equally easy as this thin, completely round one. So whatever hoops you grab will work just fine. So let's get ready to do round 2. I pulled that loop up big so I didn't accidentally lose it while I was counting and talking. So we'll pull that back in. And we're going to start this round with a chain 1 and 8 half double crochet. And I find it a bit easier to work into these stitches when they're slightly squished together, because that gives you a bit more looseness up here to be able to put your hook into. If you pull it all the way stretched out, you don't have much give there. So keep them at least a little bit squished together as you work these stitches. And do try and get under both legs of the V there when you make each stitch. So let's do 1. Sometimes it's a little tricky. These are just small yarn, takes a little bit of help, or a little bit of practice, I mean. So be patient. It's also extra challenging for me to try to do it while attempting to keep it at an angle that you can see the video clearly. And watch through the camera. And also I'm blind as a bat, so I'd really prefer to do this with thread about 1/2 inch from my nose. But one of the tricks to working with thread is to be sure that you have plenty of light. Be sure that whatever's behind your work, like for instance here I have my blocking mats behind me, is a good contrasting color to the thread you're working with. For example, if you're using a navy blue thread and you're holding your work on your lap and you're wearing black pants, there's not going to be much contrast there, and it's going to be hard to see the holes in your stitches. So try putting a white towel or something on your lap in that case. I've been talking. Let me count my stitches here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Do one more. And then we've got our 8. And then the next, we're going to skip 2 stitches and work a picot shell. So we're going to skip 1, 2, and work our picot shell here. Gosh, the stage fright. My hook is apparently experiencing by having to be on camera to get under both those V's. There we go. Gosh, you guys, I promise I'm not a beginner at this. All right, so to do our picot shell, we're going to do 3 double crochet into the same space. And then chain 2. Bring up our first bead. Chain 2 again, while trying to hold that bead in place. Slip stitch into the front of that stitch. And then 2 more double crochet in the same space. I'm going to move my camera down a smidge, try to get you a bit better view of this tiny thread. So next we're going to do skip 2 stitches and then do a slip stitch. Skip 2 stitches and make another picot shell. One thing to watch out for, this loop right here, the first one after your slip stitch, if you have to fight to get into the stitch like I did a moment ago, sometimes that one will get a bit pulled out of shape and you might want to go back and redo that one to keep the top loop from getting too big. there's my 3 double crochet, chain 2, pull up my bead. Oh no, don't do as I do. Don't lose your double crochet. Put that one back. Chain 2. Hold on to that thread a bit better than I did the first time. Pull up your bead. Chain 2 and slip stitch, making sure your working yarn is in front of the bead. Then we'll complete the shell with 2 more double crochet. And you can see my stitches are kind of wanting to twist. That's not a problem. Just again, be sure and watch out for the ones on this end, not to let them slide off the end. So we'll do 2 slip stitch, or skip 2 stitches and work a slip stitch. And then we're going to skip 2 stitches and work a shell, which is just 5 double crochet in the same stitch with no picot this time. And then we're going to chain 2, skip 2 stitches and work a double crochet. Chain 2, skip 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, and work another shell. Which is 5 double crochet into the same stitch. Skip 2 stitches and slip stitch. Skip 2 stitches, work a picot shell, double crochet 1, 2, 3, chain 2, bring up your bead, slip stitch, and then 2 more double crochet, skip 2 and slip stitch. I have to scoot my stitches over again, make sure we don't go off the edge. Oh, and in fact, it's trying to go off the edge a bit. Let me get that fixed. Sorry, trying to get away from me there. Definitely something to watch for. Okay. So I did my slip stitch, skip 2, do our last picot shell, 2, here's 3, chain 2, bring up my bead, chain 2, slip stitch, do my last 2 double crochet to finish the shell, skip 2 stitches, and then 8 double crochet, half double crochet to finish the round. Now for round 2, I did choose to cut the yarn and start over with a new piece because we're going to be moving quite away from the beginning of the row. You can also, if you prefer, slip stitch all the way over to where the next stitch belongs. I generally prefer to do that when working basically anything because I hate weaving in ends. But in this case, it was just going to be skipping so many stitches that I thought it probably wasn't worth it. But you can decide what you'd like to do. I think that's 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, no, one more. And 8. So now we're going to cut the yarn, pull it through, tighten it up so it doesn't go anywhere. Here's what we have here at the end of round 2. Got my pattern printed out here. Got to turn the page. So we're going to attach the yarn to the 4th double crochet of the 2nd picot shell, which is going to be right here, the first one after the bead. And of course, if you've chosen to do the smaller version with only 1, you'll attach right there. You can either start by making a slip stitch on your hook, or you can just insert your hook into the proper stitch and pull through. This is what I prefer to do. I don't need to mess with that slip knot. So then we're going to do chain 3 and maybe pull on this yarn in the back here to make sure that it's not going anywhere. And then we're going to do a picot shell into the middle of the shell from the row before, so into the 3rd double crochet. 1, 2, 3. Bring up our bead. Slip stitch. You know what I did? I glanced over my pattern to make sure I knew how many chains to make for the next step. Messed up that slip stitch right in front of everybody. And then we'll finish off the shell with 2 more double crochet. All right, and then I'm going to do a chain 3 and all into this double crochet down here. I'm going to do a double crochet, chain 3, and a double crochet, chain 3, and do a picot shell into the 3rd double crochet of the shell below. So there's 1, 2, 3 double crochet, chain 2, up our bead. Chain 2, slip stitch, making sure that your yarn is in front of the bead when you do the slip stitch. This is challenging to do on camera, trying to look at the tiny thread, look at the tiny stitches, look in the camera to make sure that I'm still on the screen, trying to make sure everything works it's a little tricky with this tiny thread. So I apologize for any imperfections you may see. So we're going to chain 3 and then slip stitch into the second double crochet of the picot shell below. And here's what we have at the end of round 3. Now again, this is a place where we need to start here for our next round. Because it's a lot shorter distance this time, I've chosen to just slip stitch over there, but if you prefer, you can cut the yarn as well. So in order to slip stitch, we're going to turn, and then we're just going to do a slip stitch into each chain across. And I don't worry too much about getting in only the top loop or only the bottom loop or anything with those chains, just trying to be as unobtrusive as possible. So now I've slip stitched into the second double crochet of that cluster. I can't really slip stitch into the next one because I've got this picot there. So what I'm going to do is chain 1, and then I'm going to slip stitch into that next double crochet. You know, I exaggerated the movement of that and really didn't do it quite well. You want to get the working yarn in front of your bead, but not in front of your hook, which is what I actually accidentally did there. So slip stitch with your working yarn in front of your bead. And so now we're here, ready to start round 4. So we're going to chain 3. We're going to do our large picot shell into this chain 3 space from below. So we're going to do 5 treble crochet. So that's my 5th one. So I'm going to do a chain 2, bring up my last bead, chain 2, slip stitch into the top of that treble crochet, and then do 5 more treble crochets. And I put that last bead on there before because occasionally in the past, when I've been working with beads, I've smacked one into the table and it broke in half. And then I've already mentioned that I don't like weaving in ends, so I certainly didn't like having to cut my yarn to thread on another bead. And while you can add the beads to your work using a very tiny crochet hook, I didn't have any tiny enough to go into a seed bead, so I had to cut and reattach, and it's just, that's not my favorite thing. So that's why I put that extra on there, and I'm glad I didn't need it. So let's count my trebles here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. One more. There's 10, and I'm going to chain 3 and slip stitch into the second double crochet of the shell from the row before. That's the end of my earring. I'll lay it out here so you can get a good look. So next what I'm going to do, and I won't record this part because it's pretty basic, I'm going to snip all these ends, I'm going to weave in all the ends, and then I'm going to show you how to block the earrings. And in fact, I've got the smaller one I made yesterday that needs blocked too, so we'll do both. So I'll meet right back up with you and do that. Welcome back. We are in my kitchen and we are ready to block. I've got my supplies out here. I'm on some blocking mats, but you can use some towels or whatever you've got around. The earrings I want to block. I've got some T-pins. They're rust-free. I've got a little bowl here because I've got some liquid starch. And I've also got some Stiffen Quick. It's kind of like a starch spray. And I actually don't know which way I prefer for these earrings, so we're going to do both, and when they dry, we'll find out what we like. So first let's do the starch. Don't need a whole lot because these aren't very big, of course, and I'm going to put just a bit of water in them. Depending on how stiff you like things, you use more or less water and more or less starch. So let's do the green ones with the starch. We'll just dunk them in. Make sure they get all the way wet. And maybe you'd even soak them for a moment or two, but you don't need very long. Then we're going to take them out. And I have a towel here. I'll just kind of pat off a bit of the excess. And then we'll move over here, the blocking. I don't think these need blocked too hard, which is usually what people mean when they're going to really pull open a lacy pattern. These are pretty lacy as they are. But you do want to try to get your pins in between the stitches. Don't try to split the stitch. You can put it inside the picot, you can put it inside the shell itself. Just don't go pulling open a double crochet stitch, because if you split the thread open, it might start to unravel a smidge and look less sharp and precise. So just pull out each of those stitches, each of those shells, till you've got them where you want them. You might want to rearrange once you start pulling them out and realize, oh, that kind of makes one of them look crooked. Make sure your half double crochet stitches are laying flat. If they aren't laying flat on their own, you could put a pin there. Basically, that's all blocking is just to stiffen these up a little bit so that the points stay pointed where you want them and they don't flop and curl around as you're wearing them. And I'll pin this other one out in a moment. For the spray Stiffen Quick, I just got this at Joann's. We're just going to spray the fabric until it's damp and repeat exactly the same process. This is exactly how you block doilies as well. I know some people use glue for their doilies. I've never done that. I've got this, 2-liter or so bottle of starch. I don't even know how long ago, and it's still pretty full. So I've never really had a reason to need to try another method because I've always had plenty of starch on hand. The Stiffen Quick I used once when I wanted to starch something that I couldn't lay flat. and it worked really great for that. It was actually a fascinator that I made. And I've used it for a few projects since then. And I can see over there I didn't get that corner quite as wet as the others. But I thought I would try the Stiff and Quick for you just to show you that there's another option. And I've got those two pinned down. And this is kind of what they'll look like when they're finished. This is the draft I did before. It just shows you that it's not stiff as cardboard or anything. It's still quite flexible, but it stays out instead of just kind of curling up on itself. So I'll pin down my other earring. We will let them dry. I live in a pretty dry area. It'll only take a few hours. If you live somewhere pretty humid, you might want to aim a fan on them to help them dry. But when these are dry, I will try them on for you. So I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so I'm back. I've had some time to let the earrings dry. This is the one that we did with the Stiff and Quick, and this is the one we did with the starch. And I picked them up and looked at them. They both seem just about the same stiffness. The Stiff and Quick might be even slightly stiffer, but overall, I think either way is a great way to do these earrings. So I'll be back in just a moment. We can wrap up. And of course, here we have our finished Zuben earrings. I enjoyed making this video. I hope you enjoyed following along with this video. If you make a pair of your own Zuben earrings, I would love it if you would hashtag them Zuben earrings on whatever social media you decide to post them on. And I look forward to seeing them. Happy crocheting, and I'll see you next time.